Hello, and welcome to Bearing in Mind Beer Reviews. Today, we're not going to be reviewing a beer, but we're going to be doing one of our periodic book reviews. I kind of decided that about after every 50 beer reviews or so, we'd be looking at a beer book, an interesting beer book that I've come across over time. Many years ago, the movie critic Roger Ebert said that the most interesting thing about movies, except for watching them, is reading about them. And I think that's very, very true for movies. For beer, perhaps, I think maybe talking about it might be number two, but certainly reading about beer is an important aspect. Not only just for enjoyment, but certainly for education, for learning about different types of beer and beer places, beer people. And so today we're going to take a look at a beer called Will Travel for Beer by Stephen Beaumont. And the subtitle is 101 Remarkable Journeys Every Beer Lover Should Experience. And this came out in 2018. Beaumont is one of the main beer writers in English over the last several decades. He has written the Beer and Food Companion, the World Atlas to Beer, Pocket Beer Guide. So this man is definitely qualified. And in the introduction, he poses a question, which is, why should we travel for beer? Since these days, it's 2020, go to your average supermarket or specialty liquor store and you're going to find all kinds of beer. And he acknowledges this, but the point is that we get joy by discovering new beer. His idea is that we can find differently great beer in other locations. So it's not just the beer we have in our own place, but we can travel and find beer that is also great, beer that we would not find in our local supermarket. And also he mentions the idea of social, cultural engagement, getting along with people by drinking beer. Someone also said that one of the things about beer is that good beer will make you happier than you had been before you drank it. So social and cultural engagement with people, learning about those people and about where they live, and then learning about many other fields. Beer is connected to culture, it's connected to religion, it's connected to technology, so we learn all about those things as well. Now, he mentions in the subtitle 101 beer journeys, and that number is not entirely accurate. There are, in fact, 101 sections in the book, and so the last one is African beer, 101. But each journey or each destination typically includes maybe 3 or 4 different places. So here's number 73, Vancouver, Canada, and you can see a list of all the places that are discussed very briefly, very, very briefly, but more than just one. So 4 to 6 or even more beer bars, breweries that we should visit. He also talks about beer festivals too. That's another item. In fact, the very first item is the Great British Beer Festival, and this is, as he says it, the Great Festival, the Great Major Beer Festival. The other one is the Great American Beer Festival, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So the book is divided into 4 sections, the UK, Ireland, continental Europe, and the United States and Canada, and the rest of the world. So 4 different sections to look at. The UK Ireland section covers 9 different locations and 66 places to drink. And Beaumont starts by, he describes what he calls the ideal pub experience, the British pub experience, or Irish pub experience as well. And he includes a number of features of that experience. First of all, the pub is not corporate owned, it's independent. And second, the owner's imprint is evident somehow in the ambience of the place, or decor, or overall feel. Next, special care is taken with the food, with the drink, with the staffing. And then he discovers, he tells us how all of these elements come together, and he describes one place that he feels has this, and that is the Bow Bar in Edinburgh. He also discusses some recent developments in England, such as train station pubs, which hadn't existed prior. And also he maps out a very interesting way to complete what's called the Beazley Beer Mile, which involves 6 breweries and a number of pubs and beer stores. And he gives a kind of map and direction of how to go around this beer mile. Continental Europe, there are 30 different locations, and he focuses here again on the experience of drinking beer, as he did with the pub experience in England. He gives us some guidance for beer crawls in places like Caen or Dusseldorf. And so he gives us an idea of how we should get around in those cities to find the best places to drink. But here, as in elsewhere, he seems to be a little bit stingy in his coverage of places. Brussels, one of the great beer cities, of course, in Europe and in the world, is limited to only 2 different places. The US and Canada gets 22 different entries, and of course we have to make a selection with over 7,000 breweries now in the United States, and probably 70,000 bars to drink them in. And he starts out by looking at the Great American Beer Festival, which many people think is the ultimate beer event, and it may well be, but according to Beaumont, he says that it's gotten way too big and way too expensive. The sample sizes are tiny, so he kind of throws some shade at the Great American Beer Festival. Canada. Beaumont is Canadian, and his roots are kind of evident in the amount of space he gives to Canada, fully 20 pages. And he talks about gives a full page to one single brewery, and 2 pages for a beer cycling trip around the Niagara Peninsula, so a lot about Canada. The rest of the world section gives us some kind of unusual places to drink. So he takes us to Puerto Rico, to the Yucatan, and even as far as Tierra del Fuego. And he describes, for example, Brazil, 5 pages on Brazil, but it seems like the beer scene there is actually more interesting than Canada's, which gets a whole 20 pages. And for my pet peeve here, in Japan, which now has over 400 craft breweries, and some of them rather exceptional, we get only one single brewery, and it's not a bad one, Baird Brewery, but he discusses making American ales the Japanese way. And what we get is a listing of the Baird Brewery tap rooms around Japan. And that is it for Japan. Now, I understand, you have to make a selection. With the thousands of breweries around the world, you definitely do. But somehow I think Japan might deserve a little bit more in any case. He gives us not just one beer scene, but he gives us all of them, really, the world. And he talks about how you might enjoy some of these journeys. For example, if you're going to a very large beer festival, some advice. First of all, plan your attack. Look at the list of breweries or the layout of the beer festival and decide where you want to absolutely hit first. Because these places get crowded and sometimes it's hard to move around. So make sure you can hit the places you really want to go to. Next, go either early or late. So if a beer festival goes on for 4 or 5 days, you might want to go on the first day or the last day, something like that, to avoid the crush of people. Secondly, drink small measures. Don't drink full pints of something. If you want to try a lot of different beers, you're not going to be able to if you're drinking large sizes. So he also mentions things like pack something more than casual attire, because the beer scene is kind of sometimes moving into more high-end places and restaurants and that sort of thing. And finally, bubble wrap and Ziploc bags. If you plan on bringing beer back with you, definitely for traveling, you need Ziploc bags and bubble wrap to put the beer inside. Throughout the book, we also get a lot of interesting trivia. For example, how many large foeders fill the cellars at Rodenbach? Think. Give me your answer. And second, BFM, their flagship beer is called Bon Chien, which is good dog. What animal is that actually the name of? Okay, so 2 questions. How many foeders in Rodenbach cellar, and what animal does Bon Chien refer to? It means good dog. Okay, think, and at the end I'll give you the answers. A few criticisms. I kind of wish, he has a lot of small pictures throughout the book. I kind of wish he'd had a few more maps, really. He does include a few that are really, really interesting, really good, that are very helpful. For example, here's the Beazley beer mile map and how to get around it. And I wish he'd included a few more of those, because, you're doing a kind of extensive pub crawl, which he describes in a place like Bristol or Keln or Dusseldorf. It would be interesting to try to, map it out and know how far you have between places and that sort of thing. In any case, this is a very valuable book. Will Travel for Beer. It'll teach you a lot about some of the more interesting beer places around the world, and it definitely deserves a look here. It's available in hardback and also as an audio book on Amazon. I think you can get it there. So he's going to show you where a lot of the differently great beer is in the world. Okay, now the answers to those 2 questions. How many foeders fill the cellar at Rodenbach? 294. Bon Chien, BMF's flagship beer, is named for the brewery's cat. So there you have it. Well, if you're interested in a good beer book, please have a look at Will Travel for Beer by Stephen Beaumont. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.